Good morning. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here today for all of us and to share with you elements of the intellectual and the moral arguments that underpin the Charter. These are arguments that build, and this is very important, they build on a long history of rich intellectual thought from the continent. We are just building, we're standing on the shoulders of giants and having developed this particular set of arguments for the Charter. And before I go on, I want to acknowledge, so it's the three of us who have been central to facilitating this work, but I want to acknowledge my colleague, Dr. Iyot Balcha-Gebremariam here, who has been central to this group. So thank you, Iyot. I will make a start by speaking to the contexts, the ultimate ends that we need to think about when we talk about the Charter, and the problem that we are trying to address. I will then hand over to Puleng, who will speak about the necessary approaches to addressing the problem, and then Divine will follow by reflecting on the relevance of these approaches for the continent, but also for the world. Ladies and gentlemen, so much of this gathering, so much of the discussions that we had yesterday, that we've had today, and that we will have in the coming days are about international research collaborations, about the need to expand them, to consolidate them, to better deploy them. I think we all recognize the importance of these collaborations. And in fact, it's hard to underestimate, to understate how significant these collaborations, especially between Africa and the global north, are already for the continent. And I just want to share some statistics on this. UNESCO data, the Global Science Report of 2021, shows that international research collaborations, in particular with the global north, dominate Africa's scientific output. 88% of publications for Central and East Africa arise from such collaborations. 85% is the figure for Southern Africa. South Africa and Mauritius are exceptions to that, but the trend is clear. International research collaborations dominate Africa's research effort at the moment. This means two things. It means that international research collaborations define Africa's engagement in the global scientific effort. And that means that what matters in these collaborations, how these collaborations are configured, is critical for shaping Africa's place, Africa's location in the global scientific effort. Now, I'm sure that many of you, maybe most of you, all of you, have been engaged in what is a hugely important and intensifying debate and discussion around the need for more equitable partnerships. All the speakers this morning spoke to that. The need for more fairness in the division of labor and decision-making around research foci, methods, capacity-building approaches, more fairness in access to rewards, in particular when it comes to authorship of scientific publications. These are hugely important discussions, and much headway has been made. But I think that this moment calls on us to reflect on what needs to be another ultimate end, another ultimate goal of these research collaborations. It is to advance a world, a global scientific effort in which African scholars and institutions and knowledges produced from the continent take their rightful place. And that, in many ways, is the driving motivation for the Charter initiative. Now let me go to our point of departure. Unfortunately, I can't see the slide on this screen, so that's why I keep on turning. Our point of departure for this initiative is to acknowledge the deeply unfavorable positioning of Africa in the global science and research ecosystem at the moment. The landscape, the maps that Professor Matengu shared with us yesterday morning in the opening ceremony made this point poignantly. And all that's left for me now is to add some statistics. Here are some, again from the UNESCO World Science Report. Central, East, Southern, Western Africa in 2018 contributed 10% of the global adult population, but they only contributed 0.7% of all researchers globally. That is the lowest percentage of all major world regions, and only 1.6% of scientific publications globally, half of those being from South Africa. And you can see here the figures for Latin America and the Caribbean, for South Asia and East and Southern Eastern Asia are very different. Another set of indicators, again, Professor Matengu referred to those yesterday, are the rankings. The new rankings are out, hot off the press, QS 2024, but where are African institutions? Only one African university, the University of Cape Town, is in the top 200 at rank 173. Only 7 universities are in the top 500. 5 of those are in South Africa, 2 in Egypt. And no university outside South Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Tunisia are in the top 1,000. Now, rankings are debatable, they're questionable, but they matter. And they matter also at the level of individual scholars. This is data from 2020, the most highly cited researchers globally. Of the 6,389 highest ranked scholars, only 12 are affiliated to African institutions, 9 of those in South Africa. It is clear that Africa is not taking its rightful place in the global science and research ecosystem, in the global scientific effort. And make no mistake, this is not an accident, and it is not harmless. It is not an accident because it reflects what we have to acknowledge is an uneven playing field in the production of scientific knowledge. An uneven playing field that is made up of multiple layers of power imbalances in the generation of new knowledge, new scientific knowledge. Beginning, which we can perhaps imagine as a series of concentric circles, beginning at the center with imbalances at the level of epistemologies, languages, theories and concepts, all of which are Western dominated and which translate into an orientation to the West as the site of scientific knowledge generation. Followed by a layer of imbalances that have to do with the global development frame, which underpins most, if not all, of the research that goes on here in the continent. That does 2 things. It constrains the areas that are deemed relevant for inquiry in the continent, and it implies always a unidirectional gaze from the global north to Africa, never the other way around. And then lastly, imbalances that arise from the vastly disparate resourcing of universities in the continent and those outside of the continent. Resourcing including physical and data infrastructures. And these layers together, of course, give rise to the imbalances that equitable partnerships discussions focus on in the division of labor, in decision making, and so on. So, Africa's positioning in the global scientific effort is not an accident. And as I said, it is also not harmless. It is harmful on two counts. For the continent, it undermines its political and economic prospects and its ability to take its rightful place in the global order. We must appreciate that hierarchies in knowledge production are foundational for shaping hierarchies in the global political economy. And I think, Professor Matengo, you also alluded to that in your speech yesterday. That's the first, but it is also harmful for the world, because these imbalances and the marginalization of African knowledges and actors in the production of scientific knowledge deprive the global community of the rich science, of the rich scholarship it needs. And my colleagues will talk about that in more detail. So I think there is no doubt at all that we need urgently an effort to rebalance the global science and research ecosystem as a whole. And I would like to hand over to my colleague Punen now to speak about what we would like to propose are the key approaches to doing so. Thank you very much.